going to talk about AI in the workplace. I'm going to start running through a few pieces. Patrick will take a piece in the middle, and then I'll wrap it up with some kind of pieces you can walk away with here. A couple of little housekeeping pieces. The slides will be available afterwards, so those will get sent out to you. It usually takes a day or so for the team to wrap them up and send them out, but everyone that attends or even registered and had to miss the webinar will get the slides. Questions are definitely welcome, so you can use the Q&A button to ask questions. It's a little Q&A button. You see it at the bottom of your screen. We also will be answering questions at the end, so we'll make sure we give at least 15 minutes for additional questions at the end. Great. So let's talk about what AI actually means. So we have a lot of we kind of a whole bunch of things that come under the same term of AI. So we talk about, and AI is generally the big umbrella we're talking about, and there's a whole bunch of different things under that same umbrella. Largely speaking, people that most of us use AI to talk about those. They're actually large language learning models. So large language models, those are the things like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Grok, Llama, and Copilot. All of those are different kind of tools. They're actually large language models that we use. But for the sake of this presentation, and for most of people out in the world, when we're talking about AI, we're generally talking about ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, all of those ones that we're all using on a day-to-day basis. But it is good to understand that those tools are really like a subset of a bigger picture that is happening in the AI world, right? You might have heard things like agentic AI, right? And that is a coding type of software, some of those pieces there. So, but what's really begun a huge rise in usage has been the last 3 years, those things like ChatGPT. I know it was all about ChatGPT for the first sort of year and a half. And now I personally, I'm using Claude, but there's been kind of a rise and people kind of have favorites for different things that they like there. Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about what's happening in New Zealand. So what we're seeing here is that 82 to 87% of businesses are using AI in some capacity, according to the stats. But only 34% of workers can clearly explain what AI is, despite 97% of them having heard of it. And only 34% of Kiwis actually trust AI. And it's quite interesting to think, well, what are they trusting? What are they not trusting? And I think a little bit of that comes from people not being able to actually explain what is AI. And I don't know if you've been at any kind of party or anything before, but there's lots of conversation about AI. And I'll let you add in on the Australia piece in a second there, Patrick. And then 84% of employees are using those tools, such as ChatGPT, Copilot, and Gemini. And I've definitely seen even a massive increase just in the last sort of couple of months, with lots more people starting to use those tools. So it is an evolving landscape for sure. Australia. So that's a little joke in there from Sylvie, who wrote the slides, looking at Australia.
Absolutely.
So exactly. Patrick, do you want to speak to these stats a little bit?
Absolutely, yeah. So I did a bit of research. Obviously, we do have quite a large uptake of AI usage in Australia. So around 43% of Australian SMEs report some level of AI use in early 2026. 70% of employees rely on free public tools like ChatGPT rather than employer-provided ones. And between 21% and 27% of white-collar workers use AI without their manager's knowledge. 61% have avoided revealing why they're using it as well. So there is, quite that uptake, of course. There's not a lot of trust behind it, right? I think that speaks to the fact that, there is 61% of people avoiding revealing when they have used it. There is a bit of a sort of negative connotation, to AI in some instances, I find. Only about 11% of ANZ organizations have an actual formal AI policy, and 57% provide no AI training at all. And this absolutely plays into it as well. If we don't have that sort of clear idea of how AI is being used in the workplace, then of course, employees are going to hide the fact that they're going to use it. Although they will be using it. That's what we generally find, I would
Yeah,
say.
it's so interesting, right? That lots of people are using it. No one has a policy, but it kind of makes sense that no one has a policy yet, or few people have a policy because we're not even
Mm,
clear on how people are using it, what we should be using it for, what we shouldn't be using it for. So I think that's why we're seeing 223 people on our webinar today, which is amazing attendance. So I think, and I think we're seeing the absolute same thing right in Canada, right? So we're definitely seeing usage here. 66% of all small businesses using AI. Full-time office employees are using AI at work, but only 25% relying on those enterprise-grade AI tools. So that's like, a paid subscription where you're blocking out the privacy. So lots of people using the free tools. People are saying it does improve productivity at work. And so 59% of Canadians saying they're comfortable with using AI as long as there's a meaningful human oversight involved. And we'll talk about that today. So potentially a little bit more trust in Canada, but Canadians are generally very trusting people. So a little bit more trust here in Canada. But again, I think we would see the same thing on the policy. We're getting lots of conversations and questions around AI policy and just around the general question of like, what should I allow my employees to use AI for? Like, what should I be aware of? So I think that's what made this quite a timely topic for us today. Awesome. Um, awesome. So let's talk about some of the areas of strength. So what is AI good at? It is really good at, sorry, sorry, excuse me. They really, ChatGPT, Gemini, all of them are word prediction tools trained by billions and billions of words. So it's really, as you've all experienced, I'm sure, it's really like the internet on steroids, right? So we used to search on the internet and it would give us links to things that we would then dig into ourselves and do the research. What really is happening with the AI tools, it's pulling all of that information together and then surfacing what most people are commonly saying. And then that's when we say it's a large language, it's a learning model, right? It's learning from all the other language that's put out there and people asking the same questions, getting the similar answers, right? So it's really good at predicting what word comes next. So I don't know if you've tried asking it to write an email for you, but you can basically just jumble in there what you want it to say and ask it to write a nice email for you. And you will get a nice email, right? It might not be your way of writing it. It might have dashes that you don't want. But the reason it can do that is because it's like this super brain and can kind of keep that in there. So it's great at emails or reports. It's great at summarizing data. It's great at taking a list from in a Word document and creating an Excel document, those types of things. Great at summarizing, great at translating, great at transcribing calls. I don't know anyone that's that isn't using AI for a note taker. If you want notes taken, the best way to do it is with AI, and that happened really quickly. You knew we used to sign someone to take notes, but not anymore. So those are things that AI is really good at. Areas that AI is not great at is being completely accurate. So sometimes we talk about AI as being a really sometimes a not so smart know-it-all. So by that I mean that it's really great at telling you what you want to hear or sounding super confident. We have another slide about this, right? But it's great at giving you the most plausible sounding answer, but not necessarily the correct one. There's not a lot of understanding around truth, but very good at predicting what would likely come next. And then this idea of hallucinations, right? So this industry speak for making up things that sound very plausible, right? So lots of that sort of happening, right? Laws, fact checking, mathematics. It's actually only 60%, 60 to 80% of specific complex queries. So it can't actually do great math or great complex problem solving. So important to kind of keep that in mind. And someone once told me that AI is like a golden retriever. So I think you have golden retrievers around the world. I'm assuming you do. Patrick, do you have golden retrievers in Australia? Right. So
Absolutely. I had one as a child.
Yes. So beautiful dogs, really gorgeous. Everyone loves them and they nod and they shake. They're so positive and encouraging and they love you. Well, AI is a bit like that. You ask AI a question and it will confirm what you were suggesting to be true. I don't know if you've ever tried this with planning a holiday or something. You say, where should I go in Tokyo? And you ask the question and then you say, what about this? I've heard it's good too. It will say, oh, you're absolutely right. You should definitely do this as well. So that really highlights that hallucination kind of piece there, where you're seeing that it's confirming what you're already asking and it almost doesn't push back. So one thing you can do in response to that is say, play devil's advocate. So tell me the other side of this story. So that is a prompt that you can try. Um, right. So there's a couple more things here, right? Complex math. It's not great at math. It's not great at critical thinking generally, because it's generating context from the past. And finally, it's agreeable, not neutral. Think golden retriever, not expert librarian. So there's a good reminder for you there, as I said. Patrick, I've now, talked my face off for a few minutes here. So luckily everyone is going to get to listen to you for a few minutes. So can you share with the group what we're seeing about AI, what we're seeing in the small to business, medium business space in the workplace right now?
Absolutely,
And
no
I'll post.
worries. Awesome. So, what we're seeing people using AI for in the workplace is, of course, writing code. Employees are generally the ones that are doing that. For employers, drafting policies, employment agreements, um, drafting warning letters, restructuring communications, job ads. For instance, there is a list that just keeps going and going and going. So, I think when it comes to AI in the workplace, right? It's just a growing sort of field of what we're seeing come in. As AI obviously gets better and better, and that's happening at a very, very quick rate. We're finding that it can do more and more, right? I mean, Claude, for instance, right, could do pretty much everything on this list. Um, Now, that is exactly what we're seeing in the workplace, right? On a very very consistent basis, we are seeing things, being taken over by AI or being assisted by AI, and this list of what we're seeing here is sort of the main things that would be going through. If you want to go to the next one,
Yeah,
Julie.
absolutely.
So going through the risks now. So now Julie was speaking about hallucinations, right? So an AI hallucination is when an artificial intelligence confidently produces incorrect, fabricated, or misleading information that is presented as fact, right? Actually, a funny little sort of side story is that somebody recently actually went through psychosis due to their relationship with ChatGPT because they believed that they were actually a genius, as ChatGPT was consistently gassing them up and sort of telling them that they had the best ideas and that it was going to change the world. Now, this is not sort of the crazy, this is sort of the crazy end of it, right? Now, when we're looking at it though, inaccurate data is consistent among most AI, right? So employees are treating AI as an expert to check their work with no human in the loop. Right? And what that means essentially is that those hallucinations sound very plausible with that inaccurate information, making its way into those reports, strategy, customer communications, and etc. There's ultimately no accountability for the AI bot if the AI bot gets it wrong. And if things do go wrong, the employer inherits the problem, right? Either the employer or the employee, right? From the well, either meaning employee or maybe not, unfortunately. If we'd like to go to the next one.
Yeah, and what I can add, there is right that often when you're doing some research on employment law, let's say, or we have obviously different provinces, and if we're just checking something against employment standards in a province, if you put that into the AI, the link of where it comes from will come up, and that's a
Yep.
great way to verify that, right? To click
Mm,
on that link and actually read the Employment Standards Act yourself. So that's kind of an example. And you'll sometimes find that that link doesn't actually lead you to anything that has any kind of depth, or that link is kind of
absolutely.
inaccurate. So it's really important to keep in mind that often the AI will show you where it's getting the information from, and that's where you want to go to verify some of the information. I think it is, and I think that's where the concerns around AI come from, is that we're just taking things for face value, using it that way, and not actually even reading it all, right? So I'm seeing
Mm.
lots of policies written by AI, right? And they sound like good policies, and there's tons of words in there, and they come have all the headings that the policy should have, but one, it either doesn't say anything or it says incorrect information. So no problem using an AI to get you started or get your thinking started, or I mean, it certainly types a lot faster than I do, but it's really important that you're verifying the data. And if it's not an area of expertise for you, that you're actually getting some expertise or some support in that area. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, especially when it comes to the Aussie landscape, where we do have our awards and we have our separate pieces of legislation that do apply to the sort of workforce. It's going to be very, very important that those things are checked, right? So those links, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess one more while we're just on that topic, Patrick, we have a second here, is one thing we're really seeing is that when we're doing, when we're supporting with performance management, or we're supporting with terminations with or without cause, we're often seeing an employee responding back, right? And I think we have this in the
Mm,
slides a little bit later as well. But that idea of that they're suggesting they've sought legal counsel and coming back with a response, and 100% of the time, or 95% of that time, that's actually the AI that is responding. So you can really get
great.
into a situation with AI meets AI. And what we really want to be doing is using our own brains, like verifying what we're finding, and using AI as a way to speed some slow things up, but not replace the
Exactly.
actual thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Awesome. Risk
Okay.
number two.
Beautiful. Okay, so privacy and data sharing. So we have a few cross-jurisdictional risks, right? Obviously, the New Zealand Privacy Act 2020, Australia's Privacy Act 1988, a bit outdated now, Canada's PIPEDA, and Quebec's Law 25. Employees pasting other staff members' personal details, medical information, company secrets, or client data into public tools is, of course, a major worry, right? There isn't a lot of understanding, for instance, I mean, even in Australia, I mean, I'm fairly sure this is across the board, as to what is actually happening with this information. Where is it going? And so for that reason, of course, look, this data actually may be stored, used for training, or retained, depending on the tool's terms. Now, the issue is that I can guarantee myself and most people don't read those terms, and that's sort of the issue there. Now, look, there are certain legislations coming through. For instance, in Australia, there is obviously a change coming to the Privacy Act that will sort of address this. But for the meantime, there isn't anything, right? Now, knowing that this data could be stored or processed overseas, raising residency and jurisdiction issues, it is very hard to sort of adopt that into a business and know what the consequences may be. There is no unsend button, right? So we can't undo the sharing of data once it is submitted to a third party model. What did you
Awesome.
think
So
about that?
some things yeah, I think that's exactly true. And I think that it's so tempting to go like, well, no one's actually gonna like look for this data, but you are actually in breach of privacy. So important to make sure that you're looking at your settings and make sure you're turning off sharing. Like there is an opportunity to say
Mm,
that ChatGPT or Claude will not learn from us. And when we're seeing it at that end, like actually buying it for an organization, that's when you've got more guarantees around privacy. So if you are seeing a real use case for Claude or ChatGPT or Copilot, you want to be buying the subscription that ensures your data is tight and is there. So, and that there is no learning happening off of what employees are using ChatGPT, Claude, and those guys for. So it's really important to really be paying attention to that. And I think we'll see a lot more coming down the pipe with privacy. Privacy legislations are fairly new, not that new in Australia, or hasn't been updated for a while in Australia, but definitely seeing lots of legislation around privacy here in Canada and changes to those legislations. So it's really important that we are making sure that we're, following those AI guidance that will come down the pipe with that.
Risk three. See, this is a big one. So outsourcing critical thinking. This is one I've actually spoken to quite a bit in all honesty, my personal life. This is a bit of an opinion of mine, so I'm sort of happy we've got this here. So look, AI obviously offers a very compelling but costly shortcut for thinking, right? Busy employees and managers default AI answers, sorry, instead of actually reasoning through those problems themselves. And what this does, unfortunately, is it slowly phases out critical thinking, right? Now, this is the same for managers as well as employees, right? Once you get into a habit of using Claude or, for instance, using Gemini for basically everything, rather than going through and sort of using that critical thinking yourself, is of course going to sort of lessen that skill for you. Now, weaker decision making over time is one of the results. So, with less practice thinking through ambiguity or nuance, that's where we start to make those mistakes, right? I find that, for instance, especially with HR, right? Claude's fantastic to an extent. However, it does, miss that nuance, right? So I couldn't use it, for instance, for advice. I would definitely be shooting myself in the foot there. So it's particularly risky for staff whose value is professional judgment, right? Not just output, right? Or for junior employees who, I guess, miss that chance to, so to say, build the muscle, right? MIT research says that LLM users consistently underperformed at neural, linguistic, and behavioral levels. Now, look, that's not to say that you should lower your usage of AI, but rather change the way that you're using AI, for instance. Julie mentioned, putting in prompts to ask for, the chatbot to be critical on what it's saying or what you're saying, right? That's wrong. No, X the other, right? For instance, when I first used Claude, I made sure to put prompts in to say that it was going to be very critical about everything that I said. If I was wrong, I was wrong, right? And that's very, very important. The Swiss Business School says that frequent AI usage does equal lower critical thinking scores. So there is a bit of study behind it as well, right? I mean, obviously, the logic there, does play out, but we do have the sort of stats to back that as well.
Yeah, and I think that I read a really interesting article from the Harvard Business Review that was really about work slop. So it talked about the work coming out of people using AI tools, right? And the idea being that
Yes, AI
it's
slot.
great at creating work slop, right? And what it means by that is just reports with lots and lots of words in it. And when you actually dig
Mm,
into it, there's no content. So we call that kind of like a
mm,
word salad, right? This idea, and same with like you can almost see emails that are written by chat or Claude, right? Is they don't have that same human feel to them. So just something to be
yeah.
really aware of and something to be aware of when you're working with younger employees, right? So they may feel like they're really under the gun to produce. They don't actually know how to do something or aren't sure on what you're expecting. And then they're turning to Claude and having Claude make something up. It goes back to you. You don't verify it. It goes out to the client. And the client's like, what actually is this? So really important that, employees feel comfortable when they don't have the answer to come to you as their manager and to come to you and to be critical and not using that shortcut all the time because it's actually not producing great work, right? So I think that's something to keep in mind. That article's really stuck with me. I kind of was seeing it with some of the things I was seeing kind of moving around. And then I really felt like it kind of was named once we got that I read that article on work slop. So yeah, something to keep in mind. And then this is the one that I kind of alluded to a little earlier. If you just want to follow up on this one a little bit, Patrick.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is probably going to be one of the bigger ones. So, employment disputes. So, of course, this adds time, expense, polarization, and headache to most, if not all, businesses. So, look, two sides of the same coin, right? When it comes to claims, of I guess any type, the employee thinks that they've built a watertight case, and then on the other side, the manager thinks that they've actually followed a fair process. Look, an AI written fake case loaded claim still triggers a dispute that the employer has to reply to. Now, look, this is, I'm not sure 100% if this is also New Zealand based, but when it comes to Australia, for instance, in the Fair Work Commission, anybody can make a claim. Right, especially when it comes to general protections, there is no sort of limit on making those claims. There is that limit, of course, on unfair dismissal, 21 days after the dismissal itself. But what Fair Work is actually seeing is, for instance, actually a 70% increase in its workload. They are actually backed up until about 2028, mainly due to these AI cases, right? And what we're seeing is a rise, for instance. So Fair Work, obviously, I've got that 70% increase. In New Zealand, the ERA has seen a 45% increase in applications in 2 years. So, as Julie was saying, the golden retriever is never going to tell you that you're the problem, right? It's going to tell you that you've done the right thing, that how could you have done the wrong thing because you did X, X, and the other, right? It's going to give you, solid or not really solid reasoning that sounds plausible, I should say.
Yeah, and I think what's really important here is it's really calling us to make sure that calling small business owners and managers to make sure that you're actually following the employment standards, that you're treating employees really well, because it's quite easy to try and get that information and create a case that sounds really plausible. So we're definitely seeing a lot more pushback on any kind of terminations from the employee side, right? Because they are using the AI to be like, hey, is this right? I just got fired. Is this right? And then AI will tell you, no, of course it's not right. And then Karen just shared in the chat, which was awesome, that there was recent examples in New Zealand where the Law Society has seen fake case law quoted in court,
Oh,
in
Lord.
court matters, right? Where the AI has hallucinated, made up the case to support a position, right? So I find that
Wow.
kind of fascinating, right? So it's like, I know
That's
this sounds like a good idea. So really important to be checking sources and using that. So really important there. Awesome.
100%.
I'm going to talk about what should we do about it now. And obviously, this is a large overview of kind of what we're seeing in a general overview. But I want you to walk away with some sort of clear steps on, how do you manage these risks then, and what do you do about it? So let's take a look here, right? So I think that conducting an audit is a great idea, right? So understanding what's already happening in your business, making it okay for employees to tell you where they're using AI, where they're finding success with it, where they're not finding success with it, and you as their owner to be like, hey, I actually like this part. I like us to use it in this way, but I don't like us to use it in this way, right? And being clear. So first step, understand what's happening, understand what the tools are being used for, and then flag high risk areas where you actually want the people you've hired to be using their brain to make decisions, right? Um, I think that's really important, right? Making sure that you aren't sharing data that you shouldn't be, that AI isn't drafting documents that you want drafted by your people that require some real critical thinking, right? Making sure you aren't uploading financial documentation without the privacy rules in place, right? This can be really an opportunity spotting exercise. So, we've got a clear AI policy at MyHR that we're providing some training around, and just being really clear on what we can use it for and what we can't use it for is very helpful, so that employees have guidelines. It's just like any other tool. We want to make sure that the guidelines are there. And I think the challenge here is that the space hasn't been evolving so quickly, and the tool has been free to access, right? So unlike other tools that you would normally take on, you would purchase the tool and then allow people and then give some guidelines around how to use it. This is a free tool that anyone that has computer or an internet access can access. So I think that does mean we've been on a bit of a runaway train with it, and it's trying to do this audit and pull things back a little bit. Decide what your business is going to do, right? So, making, draw a firm line around high stakes decisions, disciplinary outcomes like termination, CV screening, right? make a decision about where you're going to use AI and what's sort of out of reach for AI. What are we not going to use the AI tools for at this point in time? It doesn't mean that they won't continue to learn and grow and that we won't change our policy. But at this point in time, what are you going to allow, AI for? Right. And then introducing controls for the high risk areas. Right. So no client data in public tools, non-edited AI draft warnings, right? So idea that everything has to go through a person before it goes out. Some of those rules, like any other policy, right? You're understanding what's actually been happened, and then what do you actually want to see. What you get to choose. What do you want to see happening in your business, right? And then having a look at those enterprise levels tools, those are those paid subscriptions, and where does it help you, right? Where does it help you with those privacy pieces and setting some tools and parameters around it? With an enterprise level tool, you can decide which apps you're connecting to and all of those pieces there. And then step 3, right? So if you are investing in some tools, you're actually going to pay for a subscription to Claude. Is looking at the guidelines and the settings around it. Opting out of model training, and admins having visibility over usage, right? So letting your employees know that you can see what they're using ChatGPT for, just like you could see. It's always been the rule that whatever emails you're sending at work, are visible to the employee, but being very clear about that in your policies and that. Checking data residency as a sub-processor chain, right? So making sure that it is actually compliant with the legislation. I know that our local governments here require that the data is stored in country, right? So there are those rules that exist for different types of organizations. So making sure you're clear on what the data rules are, and is cloud storage okay, and those types of pieces. And if you're not, investing in a bring your own AI environment, meaning like you're choosing one for your organization, right? So setting those minimum standards for any tool used, maintaining approval and not approved lists rather than leaving it fully open. So, sorry for clarity around that one. If you are allowing employees to use any tool they want out there, what is the minimum standard, right? Do they need approval? Those types of things. So really important. Awesome. Let's just flick to the next slide. Awesome. And then finally, a few people had this kind of in the piece in their request, their reasons for sort of joining the webinar today is, what should a policy look like? Absolutely. So once you've done that audit, you've decided on what works for you and what doesn't work for you. What are you happy with people using the tool for? Which tool is it going to be? Where's the data privacy at? Once you have a story of what you want it to be like, that's where you're going to actually bed it down in policy, right? So which tools are approved, what data can and can't be entered, which decisions require human sign-off regardless of AI input, disclosure of expectations. Do employees need to disclose when they have used AI to create something? I know that sometimes we will actually say, hey, here's a summary report. Claude helped me create it. I've reviewed it, right? And it's just that idea that we're being really clear that we are using the tool, and there's no reason not to use the tool, but confirming that you have reviewed it. And then the consequences of breaching the policy. And like we always say, a policy is only as strong as how you use it. So explaining it to employees, training around the policy, and then getting actual sign off so that if you do have a breach in the policy, you actually have some grounds to stand on around that. Employees want to do the right thing. They want to have clarity around things for the most part. So an AI policy, I think, is a really great piece. We're definitely seeing lots of requests for this and have a standard AI policy for our customers, that our clients that we work with, just encouraging them to have this. And will it be set in stone? No. I would imagine that 6 months from now, we will be updating those AI policies. This is a really fast growing and changing environment, and being okay to even say to your employees, like, hey, this is what we've got for now. We want to keep this conversation going. We want to be really clear on, that this is an evolving world. When things come up, we want to understand. We want you to engage in the conversation with us. And then lastly, right, is that training piece, like I said there, right? So bringing everyone up to speed, training differently for staff versus decision makers. So what is your leadership team or your owners or managers using it versus your more frontline employees? All of those pieces using real examples of where it's been used well in the organization or maybe where it hasn't. And make it a recurring, not a one-off induction model, right? That's where I talked about how things are regularly sort of changing there. And finally, that it is an ongoing project, right? So like I just said, the cadence needs to be pretty regular, right? It's not going to be like your respectful workplace where you are going to retrain it, but not a lot changes year on year with a respectful workplace policy. You want to retrain it. Your AI policy, you could expect to be making edits to it fairly regularly. And it could be a much more dynamic policy where you're having conversations, you're teaching each other around the tools, and you're keeping an eye on the tools, right? And stay connected to your team and understand what they're using AI for, right? We don't want people hiding their work with AI. We want them out in the open. If it creates more capacity in their job with the easy stuff, that's amazing. Let's use that capacity with those high thinking activities. There's definitely that fear that I'm going to be replaced by AI, but setting that culture of like AI is here to enhance us with the simple repetitive stuff, enhance our processes, make our reporting better. And what we really want you for is the use of your brain power. Identify who your superstars are and involve them in the reviews. If you have someone that's excellent at AI that seems to be using it in all the right ways, and that does have really good understanding of what's happening, some people are really digging in deep here. Make sure you're engaging them in the conversation. Anything to add there around policy or review or anything I missed there, Patrick?
I think you missed. No, I think that you've covered it quite well. In terms of especially when it comes to identifying your super users. I think that's very very important. That's one thing that I always that I always advise, right? Involving people when it comes to reviewing these kinds of things, and it does sort of build that trust with employees as well.
Awesome. And then finally, how we help, right? So obviously we can help you write your AI policy. We have an Ask Us button, right, with a 3-hour turnaround time. If you're a MyHR customer, if you're interested, obviously learning more about MyHR, we'd encourage you to get in touch. People sometimes ask us, it's quite interesting when we're talking to new businesses about joining. We always show the little bubble and we talk about our advisor here, Chloe. The same would be same with you, Patrick. They would talk about you, and people will say, "Is Chloe a chatbot?" It happens all the time, and no, my HR advisors are real people that are using their critical thinking and that are have tons of HR experience in Canada CPHR certified. So really important that we are that it is a real person because we believe that HR cannot be outsourced to AI, right? So we can also write a performance improvement plan or a disciplinary letter if you need something related to AI usage. We can support you with that there. Awesome. Fantastic. That's what we've got there for you. I can see some questions here, or some comments here, which is awesome. We're right on time. We have 15 minutes left to answer any questions you have, and go from there. So a couple of questions, we'll just pass them back and forth here. Should HR own the audit around AI? If you have an HR department, it sort of makes sense, but I would want to be including the managers to reach out to the employees and really getting people involved in getting that information, right? So it's just not an HR problem on how your AI is being used. It's something as a leadership team, you really want to build awareness around the whole organization.
Great.
Juliet has a good question here. Patrick, I'll pass it to you. Can you touch on an employee's rights if you have pushback from an employee who doesn't want to or refuses to use AI if you want to incorporate into part of your business? So any thoughts there, Patrick?
Yeah, look, I mean, look, that is a bit of a grey area at this point. I mean, look, what in Australia, that would be something called a reasonable management instruction, right? Now, it's all dependent on, I guess, what their pushback is and why, right? Is it some sort of personal thing that they have? And if so, what is it, right? Is there anything to do with mental health per se? Are they saying it's a psychosocial hazard? Look, they don't essentially have unilateral rights to say, no, I'm not doing that, right? When it comes to, something like this, especially if it's reasonable in nature, you're absolutely going to be able to tell an employee, hey, we need you to use this AI tool. It's part of your role. So when it comes to, I guess, an employee pushing back on that, they don't have that much power. This would be a very simple, I'd say, direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I want to know where that pushback is coming from as well, right, Patrick? Like, is it fear
Yeah,
of the use of the tool, right? And is the tool
yeah,
really necessary for the role? So I'd want to understand where that pushback is coming from, and then
exactly.
understand if it really is a requirement of the job or not, right? But really good. I think that people do have different levels of comfort with technology, and AI is a bit of a big leap forward, right? I think the interesting thing is when people do try AI, it's actually quite an easy technology to work with, right? You simply ask a question,
Absolutely.
right? So it's interesting. So I'd always want to understand where's that pushback coming from, right? So
100%.
one question I had is from Lori was: is it better for person-centric organizations over 70 people to be using one AI tool? I think there is some merit to having one tool that the organization uses, and some of the merit is that if you buy a subscription there, then you can actually have a look at the subscription and having a bit more management of those controls there. So if you are actually going to pay for an enterprise tool, then what you do want to say is like, here we use ChatGPT or we use Claude, right? And that's decisions that I'm seeing sort of organizations use. You can try some out for a while and then say, hey, we're going to make a decision. And that decision doesn't have to be permanent. You can use Claude for 6 months and then decide you want to switch over to chat. But I do like the idea of, especially if you're going to put some controls in place. You can have a couple that you're using, but if you are going to purchase it, you want to push people into that realm where you are seeing that one usage, one platform being used.
Absolutely.
We have a question here about I'm given understanding that Copilot within a 365 subscription can be used without having data shared. Are there specific prompts that need to ensure that? All of them are a little bit different, but generally where you see it is in the settings tab. So it's not in the actual prompting part. It's generally in the settings. And if you go into setting for any of the AIs, you can often click off I do not want my data shared, or please don't learn from my situation. So I know that's the case in Claude and ChatGPT. So I'm assuming it would be the same in Copilot. Oh yeah, this is interesting. Should a provider be informing a client they are using AI, thinking about a doctor or a patient appointment? Should the patient be made aware prior to AI being used for the doctor to record their appointment notes? I would say yes. I think that is a
I say
privacy
yes.
piece there, and I have actually had that happen to me. We do let people know that right now in MyHR you can see right away that the questions, if you enter a performance and disciplinary support, please, the AI will ask you extra questions that will help us and help us save time, and that we don't ask you those questions, right? So at MyHR, we're very upfront about when we're using AI to support and help. Our AI generates job descriptions for us, and then we have a human person looking over it. So I would say a best practice is to be upfront about where you're using AI, but also describing where the human interaction is as well. So I would say that's a best practice. Anything to add there, Patrick?
Not on that one, no, no. I mean, when it comes to, oh, actually, no. I guess when it comes to, I guess the sort of the privacy laws around it. I mean, look, state by state, it is different here in Australia, but look, on an ethical level, absolutely, I would say that you should always be letting somebody know, when AI is taking notes, right? I mean, or for instance, if something's being recorded, it's the same thing, right? Victoria, for instance, is a one-party state, so people don't actually need to be notified when they're actually recording them. So that AI sort of use is the same in that sense. But that doesn't change the sort of ethics or the optics around it.
Yeah, and thanks to Helen, she let us know in New Zealand that yes, it is the law that you need to let people know when you're using AI to
Mm,
record. So
there you go.
awesome. I think that's very helpful. Some questions around which one is better. And I think because
That's
asked,
very,
and you could certainly ask Claude, and I'm sure Claude would tell you it was the best. Um, yeah, really, my experience is that different models have different areas of strength. Like Chat is getting better with images than Claude is,
mm,
but I can't really recommend on. We can't really make strong recommendations on that. My recommendation would be to, try it for yourself, right?
absolutely.
And I don't know, Bryce asked a good question about what are the disadvantages of using multiple platforms across your business, providing a choice between them. I don't think there necessarily is a disadvantage as long as your policy is clear around what your expectation is, which platforms are you okay with, and what are your expectations around how the platforms are used, how privacy is managed, and what work can be done through those. So yeah, so no no pieces there, no specific recommendations there. We're into our last couple of minutes. Any last questions here? I'm kind of having a read through. A good question about the environmental impact
Mm,
of AI. I think that's definitely some conversations I've heard and some conversations happening there. Don't have any
mm,
specific guidance around that, but a really great piece to consider. And I think we will see that starting to come up, right? When we're looking at how green is a business, right? Are we using the AI or not? A question for an AI audit template. Yeah, we can look at providing that in with the notes. But thank you for that request there. I think that's a potential add-on that we can provide with you there.
mm.
Let's see if there's
I
any
do see.
last questions. Yeah.
I do see one. How relevant is risk for? So back when we're talking about employment disputes in schools and educational
Oh yeah.
institutions. So I guess when it comes to those employment disputes, I mean we're seeing them across the board, right? I mean it would absolutely be relevant to schools and educational institutions. It all depends on essentially what happens, right? So I guess the main claims that you would generally see in schools and institutions would probably be general protections claims. And when it comes to those sorts of claims, absolutely the relevance is there when it comes to AI, being the catalyst for the creation of that claim, right? Basically telling the employee that they do have X, X, and X going for them, and that they have a very strong case. So yeah, look, I mean, I would say definitely when it comes to schools and educational institutions, probably on a probably less so than other sectors like your general retail or your social community services, etc. But still there, definitely.
Yeah, and I think it's just really that access to this idea
Mm,
that there's someone that can answer your questions, right? It's just and it feels like a person giving real advice, right? So I think that's the piece where we're seeing, right? And you'll often hear people say like, well, why don't you ask Claude, right? As if Claude
yeah,
is a
literally.
person and an
Instead,
all-knowing being, right? And
it
I
used to
think
be
that's
Google it.
where we're seeing. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Why don't you ask Claude? So I think that that's where we're seeing it, and I mean, it's not bad that employees are aware of what a
Mm,
fair employment practice is. It just means that as employers, we need to make sure that we are actually being fair and able to respond when what they're coming back with is not actually accurate, right? So keeping in mind that what they're coming back with in a dispute may seem like it is entirely accurate because they're getting it from an AI bot. Any last questions before we wrap up? Most of you stayed with us through the whole time there. That's really amazing. Here's some contact details if you would like to learn anything more about about working with MyHR or would like some support with developing an AI policy, we'd love to hear from you. I think that there's lots to be said on this topic and lots of conversation to be had on this topic. So really appreciate you all starting, this conversation with us. If you have further thoughts on what you'd like us to talk about or share, we would love to hear that too. You could just drop us an email, and those slides will be out in the next couple of days. Let's check that we don't have any last questions here.
I think we've got one last one.
Oh, yeah. So, out of interest, going back to the slide, reemployment disputes, why do you think the percent difference is so great, Australia versus New Zealand? I'm going to have to give that one to you, Patrick.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, look, I guess the reason is because it's never been easier when it comes to Aussie claims, right? There's three different types of claims that you can make. There's an underpayment claim, generally done through the court, sometimes through Fair Work, general protections, and unfair dismissal, right? So those are the sort of three different sort of claims that you could make. And of course, AI makes it easy for you to do any of them, right? Now, when it comes to the Aussie landscape, it's a bit of a minefield when it comes to awards, the different types of legislation as well as case law. So, all those three things together mean that it's actually quite a bit harder for the employer, to sort of navigate. And it also means that it's very easy to mess up. So when it comes to these claims, there may be a bit or an air of, I guess, truth, right? And that's, I guess, what sort of gets it going and puts it into the into sort of the roundabout of claims that we've got going until about 2028. So like I said, the easier it is, the more consistently employees will be doing it. When it comes to Australia, it's a reverse onus of proof when you go to Fair Work. So it's pretty much as simple as an employee saying something happened, and the employer has to basically provide evidence as to why it didn't happen. So it's very easy for employees in Australia to make a claim. And basically, anybody can do it, and I believe it's not that expensive to do either.
Yeah, I wonder also, is there are so many rules in Australia. There's lots of places that employers can get it wrong, right? The Employment Standards Act in Canada, there's definitely some solid rules in there, but certainly not as much as we're seeing in Australia. So I think that yeah, that's a potential piece of it as well. Um,
Mm.
I just want to say thank you so much. Really appreciate you all joining our conversation today. And it's great to have you here, and great to have people jump on, and these conversations mean a lot to us, and an opportunity to connect with our clients, future and new. And apologies again for your New Zealand HR guru not being here. Sylvie's a joy to listen to. I'm sure many of you have met her before, so she was quite sad that she was not able to attend today. So, but she'll be on the next one, I'm sure. And thanks again for everything. We really appreciate you being here. I hope you all have a great day if it's just starting, or a great evening if you're in Canada, and a great lunchtime if you're in New Zealand. So thank you very much for joining. We'll end
Thanks,
it
everyone.
here. Thank you.